get started, please tell me your name, title, and your area of responsibility for Alexion.
Yeah, George Llado, Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer for Alexion. I've been at Alexion now almost 6 years. It'll be 6 years, January 1, and it's been an amazing ride.
Right. Um, and can you describe your path from high school to college and career? What experiences or conversations help to define your path?
Well, I was in the music business. I'm in my second life, getting ready for a third life. But my first life was in the music industry, and I recorded. I grew up in New York City, Bronx. By the way, the only borough that you can put "the" in front of, and
Sure.
and I was part of the sort of the groundbreak of DJing. From it went from breakdancing to DJing and then rapping, and I got into the DJing and into the rapping later, and had a pretty successful group that toured and also did film in the mid '80s. And I was as I was headed towards college. So this was the transition from high school to college. I was a musician. So Peter, picture me being a 15 and a half, maybe 16-year-old junior to senior in high school, and I have a hit record that's playing on New York City's two biggest radio stations. My head was this big. It was huge. And so that was my transition into college. As we became successful, we started touring and working with groups that a lot of people know, like Run DMC and Houdini and Curtis Blow and Russell Simmons, who everyone knows today, was my manager. And so that was my transition probably till around my junior year in college, where we stopped selling records right around my sophomore year. And in junior year, the record company wanted money back. And that's when I successfully quit my first life. And I decided to focus on my computer science degree, which I got, a year and a half later. I graduated as a senior and decided that I'd focus on technology and computers, and that's where I headed, and that's where I am today.
Was computer science your focus in high school also?
Computer science was my focus in high school. In fact, I became very interested in computers in the eighth grade. I remember it vividly. My eighth grade math teacher, Mr. McLaughlin, had asked me, and I was a good student. I've always been a pretty good student. Other than with the music business, I became more mediocre than good. But my math teacher, Mr. McLaughlin, asked me to stay after school and help him set up this new computer lab that our school was building. And they had gotten a shipment of a dozen Commodore 64s at the time. And I don't know if anyone remembers those. I'm dating myself. But I helped Mr. McLaughlin that entire week set up the Commodore 64s, understand how they work. So I had to read the instructions just like he did. We learned how to program. I started setting up a curriculum for him, and that was my first love of computers. And by the next Christmas, I had asked my mom and dad to buy me a Commodore 64 because I loved them so much in the lab, and I'd stay after school that I wanted to work on them at home. And by Christmas, my mom and dad bought me a Commodore 64, and that was my first love relative to the computer science industry and just technology in general.
Great. And I'm going to jump back to the music business, which we all know is very aggressive. It seems really good from the outside, but the record labels are famous for getting money back from artists. But what what were some of the positive lessons you took from the experience on the road? I'm sure you have to be really organized to put on a good show, for example.
Well, totally organized. I mean, I had, as a DJ, you have to have your records. You have to know in succession how you're gonna, and there are two of them that are going at the same time, and so you have to have them placed in a certain place. So and you spin them very quickly. You take them off the needle, put the next one on the turntable. So organization and how to do things very quickly and keep pace with the folks who are rapping. That, I mean, a multitasking mastery that started back then, right? So I could walk and chew gum at the same time. The other one the other thing that was very positive that came out of the music industry is I have no fear of talking and presenting to people. Well, I played at Wembley Stadium. I played at Madison Square Garden in 1985, and so that nervousness was beaten out of me, right? And so I'm really comfortable doing anything in front of large groups or small groups, and it all comes with the confidence of what you're presenting and how you're doing. And I always thought of myself as the best back then, so I was very confident in what I was doing. The same way that I think when I'm presenting to someone, I'm presenting things that I have a mastery of, that I know what I'm talking about. And so there's a level of confidence that just goes along with the territory that I really learned back from the music days.
That's a great answer, and I'm sure people get a lot out of that. How did you originally become interested in bioscience and biotech?
So senior year in college, this is in the I was a January graduate. So I in October or September of the year prior to graduation, typically that's when folks come to campus, right? October, in the October timeframe. And again, I was a January graduate, I wasn't a fall graduate like the rest of the folks. And what happened was a number of companies had come to interview. Being someone in computer science, I wanted to work for the big companies of the time. So at that time, we're talking IBM, we're talking AT&T, a company called NCR, EDS. These were sort of the top tech companies that me and my friends that were studying computer science wanted to work for. I had gotten a really neat offer from AT&T to they had a management program at the time where you do kind of 3 years in this program, and they move you from area to area, and then you progress over the years, and they watch you and get you into the sort of the management curricula. And I really liked that, and I had gotten their offer, and I had accepted it. And all of a sudden, this company called Merck shows up at on campus. I know nothing about Merck, Peter, right? So think, this is 1989, 1988. There's no such thing as direct to consumer advertising. You couldn't advertise on TV, if you recall. That didn't happen until maybe the mid 90s, if not late 90s. And so I didn't know who Merck was. And I knew that they weren't a technology company, but my friends had interviewed with them and said, "Hey George, listen, we know you got to, you interviewed with AT&T and you got the job. You should talk to this company called Merck. They're really cool." So I ended up in the lounge one day having lunch, and I saw that Merck had slots open, from the like 12:30 to 1 o'clock time frame. And I said, I'll do it. So I ended up doing the interview, Peter. Long story short, I ended up doing the interview. The gentleman, first question he asked me, he goes, "Young man, what are you planning to do in life?" And I said, "Well, I'm a little cocky at this point because I've got a job offer, right, that I've accepted." And I go, "Well, I've accepted a job at AT&T, and I'm going to start in February." And he goes, "Oh, that's congratulations. That's fantastic. Let me ask you a question. What are you going to do? So now you're working for AT&T. What are the things that you're going to do at AT&T that are going to improve people's lives? Like, I'm just curious, like what is it that you plan to do?" I said, "Well, I'm into this fiber optics. They're going to put me in the fiber optics group. We're going to look at this new technology called Ethernet." And he goes, "Yeah, but so what are you going to do? What is it? What value when you swipe your card at 5 o'clock every afternoon, what do you think your purpose was for the last 8 hours?" And what he was trying to get me was to think about, how, mankind and quality of life and all the things that farmers talk about. And he goes, "All right, young man, let me talk to you about what we do. You're an African American." And I said, "Nope, Hispanic." He goes, "I'm sorry, Hispanic." He goes, "But let me guess that someone in your family, if not your mom and dad, have either diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure. And I go, yep, 2 out of 3. And he goes, do you have any of those? And I said, no. And he said, well, you will, because if your mom and dad or if your family has it, you will. And so here's what I do. I'm gonna extend your mom and dad's life because we're the first working on cholesterol. You hear about this HIV thing that's killing people? We're the first company working on it. And he goes, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna extend mom and dad's life, and we're probably gonna save your life somewhere down the road. And so, can you say that about AT&T? And T? And I said, no, I can't. And he goes, well, talk to me about why you would want to come to work at a company like Merck. And so it's like I talked myself into a company like that. And he told me what they were working on. He said, you mentioned fiber optics. We're working on robotics. Those robots are connected with fiber optics and this and that. And he goes, if you have a second interview, I'll connect you with our head of technology, and I'm sure you'll be very impressed by the things that we're working on to help save people's lives. So that got me, Peter. That long way around it, but that got me. I didn't know who Merck was. The next day, my dad took me to the library. Again, no internet, right? No cell phones. My dad took me to the library. We did the research on Merck, and he goes, dude, you may want to go to a second interview. You may want to go to that second interview, right? And I ended up doing it, and that's what changed. That changed my life. That was a pivot. Just like the power outage in New York, and we didn't talk about that, but the power outage in New York changed my life in terms of music and got me pointed to music. What got me pointed to the pharmaceutical industry was this gentleman that was an HR representative of Merck and Co.
You did spend 25 years at Merck. Did you ever feel along the way that you were in the wrong position or that things were not moving quickly enough for you? Were there any issues you had to resolve along the way?
Yeah. Early in my career, I asked myself if I was in the right place. And what's interesting now, you do all the literature, right? It's not about the place, but the people you work for. And so what ended up happening is I didn't like my boss, and my boss didn't like me. And so there was one instance in particular where we just didn't get along together. And I always try to present the facts, and my facts were always repudiated with something else that was different. And I said, you know what, this might not be the place for me. And I spoke to mentors, and mentors said, no, it's not about the place, it's about the person. And here's what needs to happen. And they actually helped move and guide me to to a different areas within the company that ended up sort of giving me a second wind, and extending like another 20 years right into being in the company, which I still think is so precious.
Yeah, I had a similar experience at IBM, and having friends and mentors and people you could talk to at a big company, it's really essential.
That makes the difference, all the difference in the world, still today.
Yeah, it really that's the thing that I always talk about is the payoff of being polite, of being kind, of being responsible to everybody,
Yes.
secretaries, peers, bosses, someone else's boss. You never know where it's going to go.
That's right. Absolutely right. You may need them, they may need you, but it's yeah. I mean, there's a circle of life, and yeah, we have to make sure that we those relationships we maintain them, and don't burn any bridges.
As an IT leader in biotech, what would you say to computer scientists and programmers considering opportunities in the field?
Oh boy, today carpe diem. It's an amazing opportunity. I mean, Peter, I pinch myself every day. I've been honored, for the last 33 years. Like the first half of my career, it was, if you think about it, right, the early 90s to let's say 2003, 2004. That was like the pharmaceutical era. I mean, it was blockbusters, right? And I mean, companies just blowing up and consistently performing and producing great drugs. I mean, we're talking about diabetes, we're talking about osteoporosis, we're talking about HIV. And so in those 15, 20 years, it was like, pharmaceutical, it was the industry to be in, right? So I'm a technologist in this pharmaceutical industry, think of what's happened the last 15 years. It's been technology, right? Has been on top. And so I've been part of the pharmaceutical industry and the technology industry, being the industries to be in, across my entire career. And I'm a technologist in the pharmaceutical industry. And so I tell people that I'm either recruiting into this industry, because very much like me in 1988, 1999, I I I didn't have any appreciation of the pharmaceutical industry. The recruits that I'm talking to now that are technologists, where do they want to go work? Amazon, Google, right? SAP, Oracle. They want to go to the West Coast, even though you can't get there anymore. But they want to work for these high tech, high flying companies that are frankly doing very very well. And so what I tell them is, wow, just think about if you could, I'm that HR guy now, right? He's in my head when I'm recruiting, and I'm like, think about using your skills in technology to save people's lives in a rare disease industry. Think about using data to help, find leads on patients who are, where it takes 7 years for them to get diagnosed because they're misdiagnosed for the prior 7 years. And think about data cutting that time in half, cutting that time by 3/4, so you're saving their lives, right? That's a powerful, powerful message, and it's true. It's what we do. And so I actually show them how we're doing that, and they go, oh my gosh. So I'm not, I don't have to work on packages on Amazon or think about how many left turns from an analytics perspective I need to work on, or code, right? Or mobile phones. And they now go to, society. And a lot of the generation coming up now, they're very environmental, social, right? They are into that discussion more so than we were at our age. All I cared about was how can I make money? What do the benefits look like? And is it a good place to work? And now the kids are really thinking about the total environment. How green is it, right? And what are we doing for society that's good? And so that story in the pharmaceutical industry, in a biotech industry, is a powerful message.
Would you like to talk about some of your career highlights, some of the rollouts, some of the technologies you've deployed, or any career stories you want to get into?
I yeah, I've always prided myself on, even though I'm a technologist by trade and academically, I'm a businessman. And somewhere around 1998, I realized that I was actually working for a real pharmaceutical company, not a technology company. For a while, I thought I was working for Microsoft because I was bringing in all this cool technology and spending money, but I couldn't tie it to anything that was an outcome, right? That provided value. And right around 1998, I had a discussion, and again, going back to mentorship, I had a discussion with a mentor that said, listen, so if you want to grow in an industry like this, you better get to know the industry. And I flipped a bit at that time, Peter, and said to myself, I need to immerse myself in the business and understand how pills get made. How do they get sold? How do molecules get discovered? What's the clinical process look like? What is supply chain, and how does that thing work? And so that's when I literally I flipped on a dime, to the point where I took an assignment in Puerto Rico. I left the U.S. Well, it's still part of the U.S. technically, but I left to go to Puerto Rico with my family, 3 children and my wife, and I immersed myself in manufacturing capability, and why does product turn from white to yellow, and what's a quarantine process, and why do we keep it here for that long, and what happens when the agency comes and asks these questions. And I was still a technologist, that was still my job, but I actually hired people to do that job, and I threw myself into the business side and sat with the leadership team on the island to understand from a P&L perspective, how do we run the place? how does the supply chain work, right, from the US to here to Belgium to the Netherlands to Bermuda. And so I became a businessman in about 4 years. And when I came back, shoes and tie and all, I was a business guy. I flipped from a major in technology and a minor in business to a major in business and a minor in technology. And that was a huge game changer for me. Huge.